Good equipment design can prevent leaks. And what do I mean by that? Good equipment design. For example, good valving. A valve in the right place can really save your butt. Okay, so here's an example. I don't care what equipment you use, when you're running harsh chemicals like pesticides or herbicides or fertilizers through it, there's parts are going to wear out. Usually it's the O-rings or the gaskets or the seals, okay? So for example, here's a way to do it is have a shutoff valve in front of the gun, so if your gun starts leaking, you shut it off, you're not dripping chemical over 300 feet, customer's pool deck, customer's driveway, okay? Here's a great example. This is a spray rig built by another company, and I could probably do an hour just on this photo because this is what I would call junk. We've got a really cheap tank fitting there. Can you see that? It's kind of just spun welded in. You've got, this is the scariest part, a really cheap nylon plastic fitting here. We've got a really cheap clamp, and we've got really cheap hose. Okay? So any one of these could fail. And think about this, you know, after a summer in Arizona, you hit a bump and this breaks. And I was given this presentation in Tucson a couple of years ago, and a guy raised his hand and said, Andrew, the exact thing happened to me. I had a brand new 200-gallon weed sprayer, filled it up with pre-emergent. As I was leaving the lot, hit a bump. This fitting broke, spilled 200 gallons of pre-emergent. Now the only good thing was he was on his lot. So he wasted a couple hours and a bunch of chemical and kitty litter cleaning it up, but he wasn't on the news. But think about, I mean, look at that fitting. It's just junk. Here's the right way to do it. This is a heavy-duty tank fitting with that can be tightened and repaired. Heavy-duty metal fitting, brass shutoff valve, and then the filter. Think about this too. On this top picture, you can't check the filter on that top picture. There's no way to shut off the flow. So if your tank is full and you have a problem, you can't shut off the flow. You can't take the pump. You can't take the pump apart. You can't do anything without dumping that tank. So that's another problem. You do another hour on that. This is this picture on the bottom right was a 200-gallon spray trailer from an entity in Arizona also that was having some issues, and they were having pump problems, but for some reason I decided to get on my knees and look under the sprayer, and this is what I found. And that is just cheap plastic fittings on the bottom of a 200-gallon sprayer in Arizona. I mean, think about what's on our roads, what could get kicked up on that. Think about a couple of summers in Arizona, that's a 19-cent PVC fitting there. If that breaks, the only way you'd know you just spilled 200 gallons is when you got to your next stop and you went to spray and the tank was empty. Okay? Crazy. It's crazy. There's someone, actually what happened here was this was a government agency and they went low bid. And they got the cheapest bid, and that's where someone saved money. And they didn't even know it until I pointed it out to them. It's not worth it. Here's another example. This is what's called a sight tube on some particularly fiberglass tanks. Companies want a sight tube so you can see the level of the water, okay? But this is, and sight tubing is usually just plastic tubing. It's not chemical hose, so you can see, because you want to see the chemical. But these are two plastic fittings on this sight tube, and if either of these plastic fittings breaks, let's say the top one breaks, okay? This is going to drain down to that arrow. The water's going to drain all the way down to that bottom arrow, because that's what water does. It goes to its lowest point, okay? The way to do this, would be put a shutoff valve. I put a shutoff valve on both of them, but if you put a shutoff valve on the bottom one, then it's only going to drain to the top one. You see that? And these are just cheap plastic fittings, and put a $5 or $10 shutoff valve there. You can, now if you have a problem, you spilled 10 gallons, you didn't spill 150 gallons. And I want to train you to look for those kinds of risks before you have a problem, is my point here.